Hello and welcome to this week's Property Matters, a show that brings global industry trends to an Irish audience. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or by email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host today is Carol Tallon and myself, Brian Fox.
Okay, and we have a special show today with Claire Penny, Commercial Director of Wia here. Wia. I knew I'd get the pronunciation wrong. Here to talk about the Internet of Things. So, Claire, you're most welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let's start right at the beginning. What is IoT?
So IoT, if you think about devices that generate data, so you're thinking about sensors, meters, all generating data, you have to talk to that data. You have to get that data, pull it out of those devices and put it somewhere to do something with. And the Internet of Things is the process of doing this. So you have your device, it's generating data, you connect to it, you might push that data into a database, into an IoT platform. And then the story doesn't end there, because then what you've got to do is turn that data into something that you can understand and take action from. So the Internet of Things is the data, connecting to that data, talking to those devices, pushing it into a cloud or a database, and then making...
But devices can be phones, could be laptops, could be any type of electronic equipment.
Absolutely anything. It can be like a single temperature sensor that's up in a room. It could be a presence sensor that you might put in a meeting room to see if there's anybody in there. And you're right, it might be your phone. Your phone is probably one of the biggest devices. It's generating the most amount of data. It's how you get to that data and push it somewhere so you can do something with it. Via the internet.
Via the internet,
And how is that being used across the built environment?
Oh, many, many, many use cases across the built environment. There's so many. Companies are starting. So right at the very beginning, I guess, is the control of a building. So in terms of the heating and ventilation, I'm talking about commercial real estate now. So in an office environment, the heating will be controlled. It has to be by law. So that those pieces of equipment, those assets, those heating and ventilation systems, they're all really smart systems. And we have a building management system that talks to those systems and tells them to turn on, turn off, make sure you've got enough return airs, the temperature is at the right level, all of these things. So that's your kind of base level. Then what people are looking at now is how do we make property and buildings a nicer place for people to be in, so that you're not putting up with the building as we've done for many, many years. So now we're looking at what is the actual temperature in the room. Is it comfortable for me as an individual? And how do I measure that? And then how do I use that information to change the set points or whatever in these heating and ventilation systems? Also, if you think about meeting rooms, so anybody who works in an office who's listening will know that meeting rooms are like a rare commodity. It's very hard to get a meeting room in most office spaces, but oftentimes the meeting rooms, maybe for 6 people and only one person is in there, so it's the wrong size. Or somebody's booked a meeting room and then didn't turn up and nobody knows, because on the booking system that room is booked out. So you can use devices to tell you, is there somebody in that meeting room? Is the correct number of people using that meeting room? And then you can either, if there's nobody in there, you can release that room back into the system, or if constantly the wrong number of people are in a meeting room, then you can change that. Do you know what I mean? You can make smaller meeting rooms. So that's just a couple of use cases.
So in other words, in a large sort of commercial building with a number of floors, each room can be individually heated or air conditioned as is warranted?
Well, it can. It depends how that building was constructed, how that system was put in. Oftentimes it's a global system, and then you can't, you should be able to do individual rooms actually. But if you change that to, if you think about that in an open plan situation, it might be all one system, so everybody gets the same temperature type thing. So it depends how the system was set up in the first place.
Yeah, so I suppose the newer buildings would be more up-to-date, state-of-the-art type of IoT, would it?
Well, you'd think so.
Would you? Yeah. No, the reason I ask is because we had a bizarre situation when I was working in the States, in that they'd have the air conditioning on in the whole building from, say, June until, say, September.
Yeah.
And then, of course, traditionally at the Labour Day, they'd go back to what was expected for autumn and winter. And the summer could be easily extended with 90-degree Fahrenheit weather past that, and we'd all be boiling. You know, so obviously with the IoT, it can be done to seasonal factors as well, and and conditions of the day as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what you would do in that situation, and what other companies are looking at, is taking the data, learning from the past, and then making changes for the future. So this is where we can start to talk about artificial intelligence and machine learning and just simple rules-based engines. So if this happens over a period of time, tell me about it so I can make a change. And it's all should be normalized against the weather, So in your use case there, your scenario there, it was the weather that caused that change. So you need to know what the weather's doing as well. So it's not, so the beauty about the Internet of Things is you're not just confined to the building. You can start to look at, outside the building and bring in that information in, so you can really start to dig into what is good for people. Because at the end of the day, there's got to be a really good value proposition or use case. So there's no point doing it for the sake of doing it, because you won't get any traction. Yeah. Okay, so even on a consumer level, if there's no value in it for somebody, then they might say this is a nice gadget, but it's no use to me. So you've got to be looking at how can I extend the use cases so that it's valuable for more people. And by bringing in weather information, not only are you learning how the building is behaving and making those changes quickly and understanding how you can make changes, you can also bring that information into the users of the building as well. So
facilities management there would be aware of what's going on around. Okay, yeah.
Claire, you might just be able to help me understand something. With modern buildings, new buildings, even those using new BIM technologies from design and build stage, they're being delivered with old building management solutions and business management systems. Yeah. What's the reasoning behind that?
So building management systems, were fabulous back in the day and still remain a very, very good piece of software and hardware that help companies to control and regulate the building. But the big companies that own the vast majority of building management systems, they are closed and proprietary. Okay, so you might have a building management system that's brilliant, but as soon as that system goes wrong, there are only set people that can come and fix that for you. So it's kind of like a closed shop, so to speak. So this has gone on for many, many years, and the people who use these systems, the facility management companies, the people who operate and maintain the buildings, these are trusted pieces of software, because the last thing anybody wants is to introduce perceived risk into their daily job. And they've worked so well for so many years, like, why would you change it type attitude, where nowadays people are kind of going, hang on a minute, that system holds a lot of data that I can do a lot with, because the power of the Internet of Things is a sum of all the parts. Do you know what I mean? The more data you can bring in from different disparate sources, the more powerful the potential output is. And so people are looking at building management systems and saying, okay, that has data that I want to use, and actually I might want to have a capability in the use case if it's too hot to be able to automatically control that based on, I know what the weather forecast is going to be, I know how many people are going to be in the building, I've learned this from the past, so let's change the temperature automatically. And it's very difficult when things are closed proprietary systems. And so in fairness to the building management people, there are constantly getting the latest greatest technologies into these systems, but it's the closedness and the fact that they're proprietary systems that's causing a little bit of a bottleneck, I guess, in the industry.
Okay,
today.
Can we break down exactly what is comprised or what's controlled by these building systems? So okay, we know the breathing of the building, the ventilation, the heating. What else is covered? Yeah,
so you might have all your electricity meters connected to the building management system. You might have your security systems in the building management system. You would have your fire safety systems in the building management system. Maybe your lighting systems going through the building management system. So every system within the building is almost like the brain of the building, really. It's doing all the controlling. And letting you know when there's a problem. But then there's there's another angle with that one, that sometimes the building management system tells you so many things are going wrong that people just end up ignoring it. So you get into this false positive kind of
and why would they ignore it though?
Because it's so noisy. it's so noisy because it might be telling you, oh, the temperature went above this, 21 degrees Celsius. It went up, and people are going, okay, it's too noisy. It's too much noise. So
too much data coming in.
Yeah, and that's a danger as well.
Oh, I see.
Too much
And would it be able to detect plumbing problems or that type of?
So to tell you, no, but actually, Wia are working with a company that can tell you if there's a leak or anything like that at the moment. So they have a fabulous piece of hardware and software that can tell you there's a leak and can shut that off for you straight away. So that's where we're going.
That's where you're going with it, yeah. And in terms of fire safety, then as well, I mean,
so
which is crucial to any building.
Oh yeah, but that would be very, very governed with legislation. Your fire safety systems, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I think it's interesting when you talk about what Wia is. Wia is working with innovative startups that are bringing in new solutions, because one of the criticisms of traditional building management systems is that they don't allow plug-in for new innovations. And that's one of the main criticisms, because actually our technology has moved on, our smart building technology, so many solutions can be plugged in, but not if they can't get into the building management systems. And, we're talking about, as you said, a very good solution that worked very well, a decade and a half ago. But the reality is it lets you know when things need attention. But actually using AI and the amount of data that's been generated, we do need to be getting to a place where actually we need to know about things before they break down.
Absolutely.
We need to, this predictive maintenance. And, we had Paul O'Connor from ACASM, now Riptide, in a couple of months ago, and he was talking about how plant maintenance really has moved to predictive maintenance and is actually heading towards prescriptive maintenance, and that's all due to actually applying artificial intelligence to and machine learning to the data that building management systems are generating. So how do these systems have to evolve?
So you can talk to the building management system, so you can connect to and pull the information out, but it's difficult. And when the company who own the software for a building management system do any upgrades, that connectivity breaks and you have to rewrite it. So again, it's just about opening up this capability to talk into these systems would be really beneficial. But, a lot of companies are kind of going, okay, well, let's work around it. Let's have a workaround. Let's go. So there's a thing called a gateway, which gathers information. So talks to all the individual points, if you like, brings the information in, and then you can push that elsewhere. You can translate it, because it's all about talking the same language as well. So, you need one of these gateways to translate, if you like, the language of each device, each sensor, into a common language that could then be pushed to an IoT platform. So I think it is changing. I think the building management system companies are seeing this and trying to change, but when your commercial models are based around you being proprietary, it's quite a difficult beast to move around, you know what I mean? But I think they are looking at this, and I think people are looking at talking to the smart assets directly, to get this information intelligence.
Is technology, the exponential rate of growth, is technology moving past proprietary systems? I'm thinking of the General Magic documentary that's doing the rounds at the moment. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't.
Okay, no, it's really interesting, but it was about, bringing together the communications platform, back in the early 90s that we now know as smartphones. But it was a failed, it's apparently the most important failed startup that you've never heard of, is how it's built. And it's quite fascinating. But one of the things that was identified then was the importance of this non-proprietary communication system, because everything, if one device is sending, another device has to be able to receive it and read it, and that seems to be a problem. So I just wonder, have we moved beyond the stage of proprietary systems actually being fit for a purpose?
Oh, I think so, yeah. I'm all about protecting people's IP and things like that, but I think opening things up so you can communicate, I think, is really, really key. To allow other people to use that technology for the good of because otherwise you just end up with siloed information. And a lot of the building stuff that's coming out now, the IoT capabilities are siloed. So it's kind of like
that's understandable, though, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So if you want to have a presence sensing system, then you have your presence sensing system, and then you go on and you say, okay, now I want an energy management system, and then you've got your energy management system. Do you know what I mean? And it's all like siloed, but you've got to bring it all together to get the true value. And I think, you know, so some companies will lease the sensors for you, so you can rent the sensors and then you pay for your data. Do you know what I mean? So it's like almost space, you know, space occupancy sensing on
using
demand.
Cloud, I suppose. Computing.
Using the cloud thing.
Are you aware of, again, I don't know if this is in development or if it's being used at the moment, but you know, we talked about heat and temperatures in an office, that actually, because now we're in such open plan offices, to be able to have zones that are temperature controlled.
Yeah.
I mean, is this happening in Irish buildings yet?
No, I don't think so. I'm personally not seeing it. I mean, maybe people would jump up and down and say we're doing that, but not really. So that whole personalisation of space is actually where I believe we will get to eventually.
Okay, yeah.
So, you know, you walk into, so, you know, in my last company that I worked in, it wasn't my company, it's where I used to work, just to make it clear. You know, we spoke a lot about that whole personalisation. So you walk into the building and it's almost like the building recognises you. Now, you know, people are going to be screaming about GDPR and being anonymised and all the rest of it. But it's a buy-in. You know, you sign up for this. You sign. So you walk in, the building kind of recognises who you are, understands what your personal preferences are, understands what you're working on. So if you've really got to get a report out, it knows you onto a quiet spot, but you like natural light, so tries to find you a seat near a window that's reasonably
Sounds
quiet.
Like the Google and
you know what I mean.
Facebook stuff. This,
you know. So the technology is available to do that. It's
and
bringing
tell me,
it together.
How willing or how are the buildings that are being built today, are they people that are the builders, developers themselves, are they willing to invest? Oh, you're shaking your head. No, they're not. So I think the people who own the buildings are waking up. In Ireland, actually, really?
There is a very forward-thinking kind of developer around. That's quite exciting. But at the end of the day, these people are in it to make money, right?
Sure.
So the less they spend at base build, the capex, you know, the capital costs, the better, right? And then if they can maximise reduce the operational costs and get more money out of that property, the better. So what I guess on my side of the fence, what we've failed to do to date is to convince these people of the business case to do that. Now, we're trying really, really hard to do that. At the minute, it's kind of like, you know, you can put numbers down, you can run it through your spreadsheet, you can show them what it looks like, and it's kind of like, okay, who have you done this with? Who's done this? Everybody doesn't really want to go first. There is a resistance, because the perception is that this costs money, whereas I personally...
But it's more added value, isn't it?
I see it as much more added value.
I genuinely think that's changing.
Okay.
You know, certainly some of the developers, you know, if you look at the developers, any of them that are working, say, in conjunction with Smart Docklands and Smart Dublin, they're very much, from design stage, they're very much consumer driven and consumer led, and that hasn't been the case necessarily in the past, but it certainly is now. And the fact that Ireland has such a high quality of tenant across the domestic and international tenants, commercial tenants, that actually I think the quality of tenant has really driven up the quality that's expected and therefore the quality that's being delivered. So actually I think I feel like that's changing. So I understand the commercial case is always on the bottom line, but actually I think increasingly having these very high quality offerings has become part of the bottom line for property developers. So I am seeing a change there. I don't think they need to be so convinced of the importance of this, because actually you know, we're moving towards a much more demanding consumer for our particularly commercial buildings. Well, and that's a good thing.
Oh, I'm absolutely delighted to hear that, because, you know, one analogy I use is like, you know, who would rent a building now that didn't have Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Indeed.
Whereas,
Good
15
point.
years
Yeah,
ago,
yeah.
nobody gave two hoots. Like, what's this Wi-Fi nonsense?
I think we can take a break and give you a break, Claire, for a moment. We have Claire Penny from WIA, Commercial Director of WIA in the studio at the moment. When we come back in part 2, we'll talk about the difference between data and information. So stay with us. Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Talon and myself, Brian Fox. You can contact us on Twitter at iPropertyRadio or email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. So before the break, we were talking to Claire Penny, who's Commercial Director of Wia. Wia. I had it there rehearsed before, and then come back from break, and what do I do but screw the whole thing up again? Anyway, Claire, tell us more about data information and the difference between the two.
Okay, so data by itself, as we were discussing before the break, you have all these devices that are generating data. So it's like, dots and zeros, ones and zeros data, and companies and people are collecting lots and lots of data. But data by itself isn't really going to do anything for you. And companies are saving data just in case, which is good in some cases. But when you start to store and save data, it costs you money, right? So that data has to be transformed into something that's actionable, something that's either going to save you money or generate money for you. And if you can't do that, then you got to ask yourself, why am I actually doing this? So it's all about what value am I getting out of this. So when you have your data, it's very important that you understand what data you have, what it's from.
The weather, air in the offices and stuff,
exactly,
so forth, so forth.
Yeah, and what are the units? Is the data good data?
Yeah.
Because you can't be making decisions on bad data. So, and then understand, is your data structured? Is it unstructured? And then that informs how you analyse the data. So the data, you've got to have confidence that this is good quality data that's coming regularly, that, you know the time intervals, etc. You know everything about this data. You know if it's a piece of machinery, which piece of machinery it's from, what it's measuring. Is it Celsius? Is it like humidity? What is it? And then once you get it into one place, then you've got to transform that data into something actionable. So you can analyze it. You structure it in a format that enables you to run it through some analytical packages. You can do business rules. We were talking about AI. Run it through machine learning models, and that's a whole different topic that we can discuss. And then outside of that, then it's got to be human friendly. And what I mean by that is it's got to be visualized in a way that makes sense to us humans, if a human is going to take action on the data. So, do you have a user interface that provides a graph or some way that you can digest that data and make a decision? But you could even easily just push that data in, or the output of that data into another package to do something. So if there's a fault, Carol was talking about prescriptive maintenance. So if there's a fault, how do you get somebody, a human, to go and fix it? So you might miss the human completely and just push the output from that data after analysis into another package for somebody to go and fix something with the right tools. So the right person, to do the right job with the right tools at the right time.
So let's look at this at an everyday situation. Would it be once a month then you would go along to the director of facilities within a company, look at the data that's in front of them and decide then on a sort of monthly basis what actions to be taken? Would that be a way of
So that would be the old way.
That would be the old way, right, okay.
So that would be time-based maintenance,
right,
pretty much, and, it's perfectly good maintenance strategy, absolutely. But if you are in a critical asset situation, say a hospital or a data center, where you cannot allow any of these assets to crash and break down, you need to know much more in advance than a month. You need to know pretty much near real time in some situations that everything is fine. So checking in with that asset, is everything okay? Or getting it to message you that it's okay.
So it's constant interaction with the...
We actually had a great example of this on the show in the last couple of months. We had Paul MacDonald from Sonisys Systems in, and that's a really interesting Irish company that's actually distributed their technology, distributed right across the world. But what they're doing is really interesting. They're doing lots of interesting things, but they've got an interesting smart city solution at the moment where they deploy, and they have deployed actually over the past decade, noise sensors around Dublin. And all of this information feeds into a dashboard. So actually I wasn't aware of it until earlier this year when Paul came into the studio with us here to talk about it. But there's actually a website called Dublin City Noise. And all the data from their sensors feeds in real time and is actually made relatable and understandable for anybody in and around the Dublin area to log on and see, is noise within the permitted levels? Is there something happening in Dublin today? What's happening in my neighbourhood? So so I think that's a great example of information that is being captured right across the city.
24/7.
It's being fed in. But more importantly, that data has been broken down in a way that actually helps people, consumers, in their everyday life. They just log on and they can see what's happening. And actually, I realised lately that they actually have an automated Twitter account. So we signed up and we followed it, and so every day, or I'm not sure, is it once a day or more, but every day we get a tweet. We see a tweet telling us how noisy certain parts of Dublin are, and where the sensors are, and that links you in then to the dashboard. And I just think it's such a smart, clever solution. And I know that this is being done on building sites. So for example, on the Children's Hospital, neighbours were aware of noise, and actually the same company, I think, did the Lewis Cross City, where there's going to be key infrastructure projects that are going to inconvenience residents. There's a permitted noise level allowed. So actually, by deploying these monitors, people can see at all times are the developers within the permitted levels. And I just think that's a great way. There are so many sensors deployed across Dublin that we don't yet see the information feeding from it, and Smart Dublin and Smart Docklands, the team there are really working at bringing more of this into the public. But when you see solutions like this, that you can access a dashboard straight away, anybody can just log on and see it. Not even log on, click onto the website and see it. It's a really workable solution, and it really brings to life the interconnectedness of all of this.
Absolutely.
But we're talking about from a corporate point of view. What about from a domestic point of view, in terms of data information? I'm sure that it can apply to that as well, in a smaller scale.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's just about taking... it's translating the data into, as Carol was saying, something that you can visualise, something that
you can read.
Absolutely, that makes sense to you.
Makes sense,
right?
to you, exactly,
and has a purpose, right? Because otherwise, it's just a nice to have, and then people won't use it. So it's got to have a purpose. What's the purpose? So in Carol's example, people can understand. Are they right? Is this too noisy? I mean, continue on from that use case would be that the developer is notified to say, hey,
and that's exactly what happens when there's a breach. They're notified that there's a breach, and they must take action to stay within their permitted.
And that's brilliant then, because then both sides are happy. Do you know
but
what
in terms
I mean?
of the domestic scene, you can see how much you're consuming of gas, electricity, etc.
Yeah. But and then that's good. Okay, that visualization, I know, but what do you do about that?
What do you do about it? Exactly.
Why is this happening? Do you know what I mean? Do I have faulty equipment?
Yeah.
Is something on constantly that I don't know about that shouldn't be on? So that you can do something. Yeah. So because there's not a lot of. It's nice to know, but
this
if it's
can
too late,
detect that type of problem.
Yeah, I mean, using the Internet of Things, you can absolutely do all of this. You can use the data, as I'm saying, from the devices, run it through any kind of algorithm or business rule. If this, then that, tell me about it. Identify, because the key is you've got to know, as I was saying earlier, where that data is coming from. Where is the source of that data?
Tell me then, Claire, I'm sure it's expensive getting this type of information. No, it isn't?
No, not really. No.
Because the question I was going to put to you was, if, for instance, an estate has just been built, for instance, and none of this equipment is in it, none of this WIA is in it. Have I got that right?
Wia.
Is in it. Would it be, I mean, obviously if you feel it's affordable, that's fair enough. But I mean, if the residents didn't find it affordable, could there be a sort of a cooperative arrangement made to put the equipment in various houses and pay for it on that basis? So
companies do offer that kind of service. If it's big enough, the kind of Uber model, as a service, that you can have heat as a service. I just saw there the other day, music as a service. I saw that, I think, on LinkedIn or Twitter or somewhere. So it's down to the commercial side of it. How commercially viable is it to do that? And if you think companies do offer this kind of thing, so for example, in my house we have solar panels on the roof. We've kind of paying for those over time. We understand, when they're generating electricity, when we should put, appliances on to make use of the free green electricity. So that's a really good kind of IoT kind of use case. We understand, we've got the sensors on the roof, understand when they're working, got the meter.
But it's prompting you to take action.
Yes, exactly.
So that's there's kind of a behavioural change tied in with that as well, isn't there?
Yeah, and you can change behaviour if it's valuable. I keep coming back to this point, right? If it's valuable to people, then why wouldn't you do it? Do you know what I mean? Why wouldn't you make a change if it's going to cost you, if it's going to save you money?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking too in terms of where we're going now, because we're becoming very conscious of emissions and the use of carbon and all the rest of it, in houses and in cars and so forth. So it would be, as I say, with the way thinking and behaviour is going at the moment, it's a very valuable contribution to a house, surely, or to anything of any description.
Oh, absolutely. And actually in Wia, what we have are these IoT bundles that people by themselves can just use these bundles, and they can set up their own IoT system in their house if they want to. So they could have something for presence, temperature, humidity, stuff like that, and they can set up their own little IoT network in their home and be told.
Sorry, will you explain that a little more? So, as in, you're selling, are these a range of sensors for your home that you can deploy?
So not specifically for the home. There are a range of sensors that you could use in your home. So, it's a little development board. So for anybody who's never touched the Internet of Things before, what we have is a developer board, and then you plug in the sensors, and it's like a piece of Lego. So you've got your board, you plug in the connectors for the sensors, then you plug your sensors in, you connect it to the internet, and what we have on our IoT cloud platform is a kind of drag and drop jigsaw approach to development, to coding, and it's called codeless development. So you say, I have a sensor, you drag that into the workspace, it's a temperature sensor, it's degrees Celsius, if it goes above 21 degrees, send me a text message. And this is all there, you just drag and drop, and then you enable it, and then it will send you a text message if the temperature in that space gets above 21 degrees Celsius.
Wow, that sounds like you're doing for IoT what WordPress did for web development.
Yeah.
You're taking the development out of it.
Yeah. But now there is a bar on the side, a column on the side for the people who are techie and developers. But basically, your grandmother, in theory, could pick this up and have her own little IoT, device set up in the home if she wanted to, because it's that easy, drag and drop.
That's fascinating.
As long as you can read, you can do it.
Okay, can you give me some examples of how, so anybody listening in that has an interest in this?
Yeah.
How is it being used? Do you know what people are doing with this?
So we don't know exactly because we GDPR and all like that, so we don't know what individual people are doing. But we've had use cases of we used to have it on the website, a monster detector for kids type stuff. You know what I mean? So this is just a presence sensor. Is somebody come into my room? Tell me
that could backfire.
Yeah, it could definitely. One of my colleagues, he shows a really good case where we put the moisture sensor into a glass of water and it comes up the message, I'm wet. So you could have it for your potted plants. You could stick this into the soil of your potted plants. You could water, make sure your plants never get that they've got enough moisture
and not too much moisture.
Exactly,
because that's how I kill all of mine.
Yeah
Kill them with kindness.
And then the temperature, is this, should I turn the heat on, or should I just put a jumper on? What temperature is it, and tell me if it goes below or above, and then I can take some kind of action. So there's multiple. I think we've connectors for over 300 different types of sensors.
That's fascinating.
So the limiting factor is your imagination.
That sounds like a challenge. I think we should challenge to set up one of these networks just to see what we can do in the studio here, because you had a bad tech day here in the studio.
Let's not talk about it. Okay, we're doing very well at the moment. Let's not.
So we can challenge that. I am fascinated though by we mentioned earlier that there's a behavioural change needed as well. So let's step away from the technology side a little bit and on to more the human side of change management. Where do we begin with that when the transformation is so? It can be quite overwhelming.
Yeah. So I think the important thing is you bring people along on the journey and don't scare people. If I'm talking now less about in people's homes because you have a lot of control of your own home, but in terms of in the corporate world where you may be in an office and then all of a sudden you see these things going up around, these sensors, gateways on the wall, and everybody's going, oh, I'm being tracked now. It's another stress for me. It's to inform people and bring people along on the journey and say, look, this is the reason why we're doing this, and make that very clear and be very honest with people.
And are people suspicious, generally speaking?
Well, I went in my, where I used to work, we set up a presence sensing system in this client's, it was public sector as well, over in the UK, and the employees came in over the weekend. This was all set up over the weekend, and it was about understanding, do we have the right amount of real estate? Okay, so this particular crowd had 5 buildings that they owned, right? And they were saying, look, are we using all 5 buildings or are we not? Because currently today they do the way that companies understand how much space is being used. Somebody walks around with a clipboard, okay, once a month and goes, okay, you're sitting there, tick, that's its empty cross, and it's this is how it's been done forever. Right. So by introducing the Internet of Things and putting like a presence sensing system in place, which can be removed at any point, under desk sensors of somebody using this space, they were just trying to understand, are all these 5 buildings being used? And it was as simple as that, but they didn't really communicate this with the employees. Sure. So this was deployed over a weekend, so there was no disruption to the employees. And then the guys walked in on a Monday, saw this gateway on the wall and went, oh, I don't think so, and just pulled it off the wall. Right?
Really?
Yeah, and the data went, the dashboard just went.
Isn't that reminiscent of when CCTV was introduced kind of 20 years ago into the inside of buildings, and people were, or as staff coming in and out, the tracking systems kind of moved from old card clock-ins to fingerprints. Like I can remember 20 years ago being introduced to fingerprints scanning when you come in. They never worked. But there was that reticence. People people weren't comfortable. And at a recent presentation I was at, there was a breakdown of the characteristics of key demographics, and they were saying that actually millennials really have much less trust for social media, than the generation. The generation before it mightn't have been so familiar, but that there's a greater, Gen Z is likely to have a much greater sensitivity about data and privacy, maybe even than millennials did, and. So some of these technologies are likely to be actively resisted.
Well, obviously, in your case, it certainly was.
Oh, it was, definitely.
And it was ripped off the wall.
Ripped off the wall, yeah. So the big lesson learned for everybody involved in that project was to bring people to communicate, right? So they communicated with the staff and said, look, this is what we're doing. Nothing to fear. We're not tracking anybody. We don't know. This is why we're doing it. And actually, the story was that out of those 5 buildings, 2 of the buildings were only used about 20% of the building was ever in use. Sure. So what they did was they said, okay, what we're going to do, now we have this information, is move the people from these 2 buildings that it's very infrequently used, give you space, update the space and put you over here, and then we can just shut those buildings down so we're not using electricity unnecessarily and we're not having to clean them all the time and that kind of stuff. So that was, the output of that project. But so to answer your question is to bring people on this journey, and you'll find people are very open to change. They really are. I mean, if you think about this computer we all have on our desk, i.e. our phone, I mean, it's not really a phone anymore, it's a computer that's more powerful, I think the statistic is, than the first rocket that went to the moon or whatever,
which is a worrying thought in itself.
But people will use it because it's valuable to them. So it's value in that.
And it's adding value, and that's what it comes back to. So look, in terms of the understanding the difference between data and information, I think that's important, and the human element. But I definitely want to come back and speak to you about the business processes, because I think maybe that's where a lot of companies fall down in their digital transformation. So look, we need to take a break now, but stay tuned after the break. We'll continue the conversation with Claire Penny of Wia and find out more about ecosystems and disruptors. Stay tuned.
To Property Matters here in Dublin South FM with Carol Tallon and myself, Brian Fox. In the studio we have Claire Penny, and now we're going to talk about ecosystems and disruptors. Just in a word, how would you describe ecosystems and disruptors? Because it's something that it needs, I think, a lot of explanation.
So in terms of the ecosystem, it's kind of like how everybody comes together for the greater good, I guess, to keep the I kind of know from an environmental perspective, but how everybody plays their part. So if some company came to me in the morning and said I can do everything, I would not trust them at all, because you can't do everything. No one company can do everything, and so you need this kind of ecosystem of people who really are subject matter experts in
know what they're talking about,
exactly, in some element, and can deliver that element, because it's so broad. So the Internet of Things is so broad, that if one company can do it all, then it doesn't make any sense.
They're just generalists, really.
Yeah. So you've got your whole your networks and your hardware development, and then you've got to have your business people that can do the business cases. And what we're seeing is that big companies are actually saying, we can't do this alone. We have to reach out. So we were talking about construction and property people. They're beginning to reach out and say, okay, we can't do this alone, because they are not software.
Well, that's what I was going to come to in the first part. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we need this kind of cohort, this ecosystem of people who can all leverage off each other and deliver this whole thing. Because if you think about a smart city, think about all the moving parts in a smart city. I always struggled with my last employer around, we were trying to sell smart city solutions, but I was like, well, who do we sell this to? Who's going to buy this?
And how's that relationship at the moment? Or is it growing? Is it trusting that between trusted people like yourselves and construction developers?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think that construction has its demons, right, in just the way that the construction's been delivered. But I think with people, non-threatening people like Wia, who can only bring good into the construction landscape, there's a lot of trust, when we're talking to quite a few people in that space around the art of the possible. What
because of your reputation. Obviously.
And like, what if you could do this? What would that mean to you and your clients? And that's really key, because at the end of the day, as I keep saying, you've got to do something that's for the good, that makes a process better. Because actually, if you talk about, I bring up process there. We've talked a lot about technology, but technology by itself is not going to cut it. You actually have to change the way that your business processes. So I have a little example around this, around smart bins in an office. So a company I heard about putting smart bins that basically have a sensor on them that tell you when the bin is full. Right?
It's like the big belly type of idea.
Exactly, like the big belly, but inside an office, right? And this company said, well, that was a complete waste of money, because because the person that empties the bins just comes around and empties the bins. So for me, that was an immediate, it's a very simple example, but that's an example of somebody not changing their business process. So what should have happened there was that, talk to the people who empty the bins and say, this is how we're going to do it now. You will empty the bins when you get an alert or a text. And you will plan around that, rather than 5 o'clock every night come and empty the bins. So it's a really simple, but I think quite visual example of changing your business process.
But doesn't it really make sense, so that you don't have periods when the bin might be overflowing, and similarly you don't have waste by emptying a half empty bin.
Indeed. Absolutely.
So it's really logical when you break it down into individual examples.
Yeah, and it's the same with toilets. Some of my ex-colleagues will talk about toilets forever, like cleaning toilets on. So basically, anything that's time-based is up for grabs.
And routine.
IoT. Yeah, anything that I do this at 9 o'clock, at 12 o'clock, at 3 o'clock, and at 7 o'clock, right? Anything that's like that is up for grabs in terms of an enhancement, of an improvement of an operational inefficiency. Because if you go and clean the toilets every 4 hours, how do you know those toilets need cleaned? Or they might need cleaning every 2 hours, because there's a huge amount of traffic through those toilets. So you really got to understand.
Or at different times of the day, it might be a different case altogether.
Absolutely, yeah.
I love that as a really simple rule of thumb. Anything that's time-based is up for grabs. That's really helpful, because then people can actually look at their work life, their processes within the office, and say, okay, actually, what's time-based? I'm thinking actually there's probably a lot of overlap there with health and safety routines.
Oh, yeah.
Hotels as well, I'm sure. So it would be
you've seen hotels now come to the fore. Where there's no reception, hotel reception. It's all done with a virtual concierge. Or you sign in using your phone, and you're seeing this more and more. more. So if you're doing that without the human touch, it's got to be really good. It's got to be really slick, So
And disruption. I mean, I associate disruptors with, years ago Ryanair going against the big companies, and now Uber with not in this country but abroad. So how would you see disruption with yourselves?
Yeah, so I know you've had people from the construction industry in here. I mean, construction is absolutely ripe for some kind of disruption, and I don't think people should be afraid of that who are in the construction industry. I think they can be absolutely part of it. But let's just change the way we do things. Just because we've always done it in this way doesn't mean we have to continue doing that. And I think there's a lot of, I do know of people who are kind of just outside of the construction industry giving it a go in terms of like offsite manufacturing, maybe 3D printing, and then the traditional constructors laughing at them when they fail. But failure is good, right? Because you learn so much from failing. You probably learn the most from failing. I mean, when as a kid, this is a bizarre analogy here. when I was a kid, I used to ride horses, right? But I used to ride with adults, and I was on the smallest pony, so I was always at the back of the ride, and we go around the riding school, and everybody's fault. By the instructor corrected. By the time she got to me, she was like, "Oh, look at Claire, she's brilliant." But I was just learning from all of their mistakes, and I looked great sitting at the back of the ride. Do you know what I mean? So instead of pointing fingers, we should be working together and learning from this, because it's only for the good of everybody. If you think about natural resources and where we're going with that, and how we've got to mind how much we're digging out the ground, this whole circular economy.
Well, not enough, but we've a shrinking workforce, health and safety on site,
And when information is in people's heads, that's a very precarious place for a company to be in. So if you've got a lot of people who are super smart at what they do, but it's all in their heads, when those people leave a company, the loss of IP, that's gone, right? So having systems and capabilities that enable the sharing of this knowledge, almost the democratization of this information without losing your USP or losing your IP is really key.
But speaking of disruption, with some people there's a reluctance to share that information because they know how valuable that is.
Absolutely.
as a valued employee. So do you see that there as a problem?
So yes and no. I mean, you can't be naive about this. I mean, companies need to differentiate, and they need to have their IP and their unique selling points, most definitely. So I think there's a time and a place, and I think people are probably doing a lot of internal disruption. They're branching off. I mean, with Wia, we deal with a lot of innovation teams within companies. So you'll be surprised, almost every single company has an innovation team. What we're not seeing 100% of the time is that team is necessarily got a good mandate. Do you know what I mean? Within the company. So it might just be, okay, we'll put this team over here and we'll let them play around with stuff and see what they come out with. But seeing that go from a really good idea, innovative idea, to, okay, let's make that part of the business. That piece of the jigsaw is a little bit lacking from what we're seeing.
That seems very really tokenism, innovation for the sake of innovation, as in it's something that organisations feel they need to be doing, but they actually don't really want it to impact on their day-to-day.
I think it's kind of... I think they just need to make it part of the business, and maybe even have those people reporting to the right person. Do you know what I mean? Like in the company, so if you've got a chief strategic officer, or whatever, or chief data officer up there, it's when they're off at the side. Sometimes it is a bit of lip service, but I think the fact that they're there is really good, and I think that, if they hit on something, hopefully then it does get pushed up. I mean, I know in my own experience from previous roles, almost it's worse if you've got a really good idea that you've tested the market, you genuinely believe it's a go. Is the internal sell is almost harder than selling pitching externally. It's much harder to get execs to buy into your idea. They kind of go, okay, can we go out in the market and buy this now? Do you know what I mean? For a faster route to market. That's
cultural though, is it?
It is culture, yeah.
This is actually a problem that we've identified over the last 2 years. And in fact, what we saw was that all of the things that we assumed were the resistance points actually weren't really. But what was happening is that you had people at C-suite level that didn't feel informed enough to be able to empower their innovation teams. And in fact, what we're doing through PropTech Ireland and Property District for 2020, our mission is to run a series of what we call the C-suite sessions, and it's actually kickstarting next month with Anthony Slumbers coming over from the UK to explain to C-suite level executives at a very broad level how the use cases across real estate for artificial intelligence. And the reason we're doing it, it's not a technical masterclass at all. This is very much a broad overview so that the decision makers within the industry will know enough to be able to empower the innovation teams, and they'll recognise when good opportunities and workable solutions are coming up.
Yeah, no, that's a great thing to hear. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that something you're finding?
So I mean, like I say, we do work with a lot of innovation teams, and they're brilliant, like really, really good. But I think that kind of conversion. And I think you're probably right, Carol. I think it's a language around that internal sell, having enough information that it's not just a shiny bright button, that we all should go running after, that it's actually a really good value proposition for the business, and it's not too far left field that spooks people. I think maybe there's a learning there around the people who lead these innovation teams, that they that they have that training to be able to translate that into a good value proposition. I think is key.
When you bring it back, human nature is still human nature, respectful of the technology, and it's all about the early wins. Okay, so that was Commercial Director of Wia, Claire Penny. Claire, thank you so much for being with us today. That's it from us in studio today. And please get in touch with the show by emailing hello@iPropertyRadio.com or on Twitter @iPropertyRadio.
Thank Claire Penny for joining us in the studio, and also thanks to Danny Hickey on sound. Back at the same time next week. From Carol Tall and myself, Brian Fox, have a great week.